So right now, if you were to buy a house with a 7.5% interest rate, can you guess how much you're going to pay after 30 years? Well, you're going to pay about $1 million of interest and principal. So total $606,000 of interest for your $400,000 mortgage. It's basically a borderline scam to buy a house right now with any interest rate above 7%. So right now, what's being popular again is these ideas of like, hey, don't worry, just pay an extra $500, an extra $1,000, break your payment up into two, all these like fancy hacks to make you not feel so bad about the fact that you're getting scammed by a 7.5% interest rate. So in today's video, we're going to really break down what happens to your mortgage if you put an extra $1,000 a month. Now I'm going to use $1,000 because that's a big round number, but in reality, I'm going to show you different variations and different numbers. I'm going to show you how to calculate this yourself so you can get a good idea of the magic of how it works and how you can come up with your own plan instead of falling for some TikTok that says do this and you have it paid off in 10, 15, 20 years. So for starters, let's figure out how a mortgage payment works. So let's go back into that first example I showed you, and we can see here for a $400,000 loan amount, we're paying 7.5% interest, and essentially the total cost of the loan after 30 years will be $1 million. We can see here the total amount of payments are going to be $360. This adds up to about 30 years. So essentially we have to remember this. A mortgage payment is made up of 5 different factors. There's your principal, there's your interest, there is your property taxes, your homeowner's insurance, and your mortgage insurance. So that's 5 in total. In today's video, we're only going to focus on your principal and interest. So this number right here gives us our principal and interest. Now, here's some things to consider. There is 2 universal rules that we have to follow when we're trying to figure out what our mortgage payment is. When you establish your mortgage payment, your principal and interest will always add up to the same number. In this case, they will always add up to $27.97. Let me show you an example. Payment number 1, we're recording this in November, the last days of November in 2023. We can see here the principal is $296.86 and the interest is $2,500. As you see, that adds up to $27.97. If you're wondering what percentage of the payment that is 89%. 89% of your payment, your principal and interest, goes towards your interest on a 7.5% interest. Yeah, crazy. And your last payment is the same exact thing, except your principal is now a lot higher and your interest is a lot smaller. But either way, they will always add up to $27.97. And the second universal rule is this number will never change. There's only 2 specific ways it changes, and that is in the beginning of the mortgage when you're creating the mortgage, or if you ever refinance. And the way that it changes is quite simple. You either adjust the interest rate or you adjust the loan amount, the starting loan amount. Now you might buy a house, you might say, well, Javier, hold up. My uncle bought a house and his payment went up by $100. Yeah, that's true. But what probably happened is their taxes went up or their homeowner's insurance went up, or even something happened with their PMI. But their principal and interest, as long as it's a fixed interest rate, that will remain that same number unless there's some kind of modification to the actual loan itself. Got it? Cool. Now, how do we figure out what is applied towards the interest and the principal? Well, here we're going to get a little specific here, and I'm actually going to pull out my calculator here so we can kind of follow along. And then what we're going to do as well is we're going to do some other examples. Okay, so let's start off with payment number 1. What happens is you start off with your remaining balance. So in this case, your payment number 1, your balance is $400,000 because that's your first payment, right? So what you do is you get $400,000, okay, and then you multiply the interest rate. So in this case, it's 0.075, and that's what we get, okay? So your interest that they're going to charge for that specific month is based off of your current loan amount. What we do is then we divide this number by 12, and we get what they're charging you for the interest. And that is where we get $2,500. Now, how we figure out the principal, I'm sure there's a much more complicated math formula to figure out, but really, if we know what our 27, like our P&I has to add up to, we can figure out an interest, and whatever the difference is going towards your principal. Now, here's the thing, okay? So your interest is figured out, like I said, with your loan balance multiplied by your interest rate. Now, the interest rate is not going to change unless you refinance, right? So what happens is this little sliver, this little chunk right here that you see, the $296, that gets subtracted from your balance. So now your new balance is no longer 400K, it is $399,703.14. So then we do the same thing, but now we use the new balance. So we go 399,703.14, multiply that by 0.075, and then we divide that by 12. Now this gives us our new interest, and we can see here January 2024, that's exactly the number that pops up, right? So then we get 2797, we subtract it with this, and we see that our principal right here went up by $1. Maybe you can see in some months it goes up by $2, but really it's very slightly adjusted. So now your remaining balance gets slightly affected. The beginning, 15, 20 years, you pay so much interest. And we can see here, the interest paid here is this green line here. You're paying that big chunk of interest right away, and your principal being paid, it starts off super tiny, right? That interest spends no time building right away. That principal though, it takes its sweet freaking time, right? So, of course, this number adds up, and that's how we get this monster $606,000 of interest paid after 30 years. So now let's get to the topic at hand. What happens if you decide to add an extra $1,000 every month towards your principal? Because remember, if your payment's $27.97, don't just pay $37.97 and hope that the mortgage company will know what to do with it. They're greedy. They're not. If you give them free money, they're gonna find ways for them to capitalize on that. So when you're paying your extra mortgage payment, you want to make sure to specifically know, and there's a way to do it on that when you're paying your. At least when I've ever paid my mortgage, all the websites I've ever used, they always specific. You can add an extra amount towards the principal. So how does that work, and what happens if you decide to add an extra $1,000 a month? Well, let's get the same exact terms, 7.5% rate, $400,000 loan amount, and we can see automatically a few things change. Our monthly payment is way higher, and that's obviously because we are adding an extra $1,000 a month. So it's literally $1,000 more. But our interest paid is massively lower. It is $350,000 less, right? So your total cost of your loan is now $654K, which is a lot less than $1 million, to say the least. But another interesting thing is that your number of payments has dropped. Let me just move my big fat face out of the way. 173, which means your payoff date is no longer 30 years. I'm recording this video 2023, so that makes your payoff is you basically pay it off in 15 years. What happened? Even though you're paying more per month, you are going to save $350,000 of your total cost of your loan. Why? What happened? Well, let me compare just off the bat. This is the chart here for the $1,000 one, and here's a chart for the not just the basic one, right? So obviously here's a few things that happen right away. The interest stays relatively the same. It's a lot flatter. It gets cut a lot quicker, which we'll explain why. But we can see that principal grows exponentially at a higher rate. Why? Well, here's the beautiful thing. They're still going to get their $27.97, and they're still going to charge you 88% of the interest on that $27.97. So they're still making their way. And please don't let any real estate agent or lender try to tell you that, oh, well, if you do it this way, you get to screw them over rather than them screw. No, they're still getting their big chunk of money from that thing. But the thing is, you're removing how much time they have to do it. But it's not still the best case scenario, and you shouldn't say, oh, well, if I do it this way, I'm going to get one over. Technically, they're still making a good chunk of money off of you, so, keep that in mind. But anyways, they're still getting their chunk of money. But the extra $1,000 that you're putting down actually gets applied to their principal. And not only does it get applied towards the principal, it gets added with no interest. Now, the interest is still the same exact as in your first month. It's the same exact number, right? $2,500. Now, the main difference here is instead of $296 with 86 cents, you're paying $12.96 with 86 cents. So it's an additional $1,000. Now, because that principal got paid a lot more aggressively, that new remaining balance is $398 for that next month. So essentially, here, when does it turn into $398? Like around here, right? So basically, you cut down like 3 or 4 months of just interest payments just by doing that extra $1,000. And we can see the principal amount gets more aggressive because you're adding another $1,000. So instead of going down, a little chunk, like if we go back here, you can see it says at $399, $398 for 2 or 3 months, and it's slowly dwindling down. Here, it's dropping by, 1, 2, 2,000, 1,000, 2,000. Like it's dropping down a lot more aggressively. And because of that, they get less opportunities to charge you interest. Once again, it's still 7.5%. But what happens is that principal is collecting a lot faster than usual. And what that ends up adding up to is they get less opportunities to charge you interest. Therefore, you get to pay the house back quicker, and you save about, $350,000 total. But the more important part is $350K of just interest. That's amazing. It's great, but obviously, with that being said, there's a privilege to do this. This is not hate to be that person that just say, "Oh, just make more money." Obviously, this is a situation only available to those who are making more money that have the ability to do that. Now, here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, you don't have to be doing $1,000 a month. This is obviously a great scenario because you get to pay it off in 15 years instead of 30 years. But that's a lot of money, right? So if you even can do like $300 a month, just that little amount, your interest paid is still significantly less. It's $418K compared to $606K, still to about $200,000. And yeah, you're not paying it off in 15 years, but you have 265 payments instead of 360. So you're paying it off in 2045, which is approximately 22 years from now. So it's a 22-year mortgage instead of a 30-year mortgage. So even if it's $300, even if you can do $500, whatever you can do, it adds up. And it's a lot more aggressive. So that's why now more than ever, it's really important to buy within your means. Imagine if you buy a house, which I get it's a privilege to do this. I get it. But just imagine you wait until you can buy a house that's 25% of your net income. That should free everything up. So that way, if you can pay down your debts first and get your credit card payments off, you can apply an extra 10, 20, 25% of your net income whenever available to really tackle that mortgage down a lot quicker, get that balance down. Because let's face it, if you bought a house, you might be losing some value maybe in the next 6 months to a year. So by aggressively paying that down, you can maybe stay ahead of the curve a bit. I don't know, but there's different scenarios for sure. So the next question I usually get asked is, well, is it better to do this, or is it better just to get a house with a lower rate? Like right now, I know new build inventory houses, especially here in Phoenix, they're offering great rates, like 5.5, 5.25 interest rates. So is it better to just get a 7.5% rate and keep your money and put extra payments, or just get a cheaper rate? Well, let's figure that out. So for the same exact scenario, 5.5% rate compared to the one where you're not paying $1,000, it's definitely always like $500 cheaper just by knocking off 2 points off the interest rate. That's why that interest rate makes a huge difference, ladies and gentlemen. So just without making extra payments, your interest paid is $417K compared to $606K. Your total loan cost of the loan is about $817,000. So it's pretty similar to, what was it, like $500 a month? No, it was like put in an extra $300. Yeah, it's like similar-ish to doing that, but you don't have to put in an extra $300. It's about $800, $900 cheaper, right? So if you can try to get the lower rate, it's definitely more preferred, but still, technically, even though it's more expensive, you could have it paid off in 173 months. The total cost of the loan is technically cheaper if you have the ability to get a $400,000 mortgage at 7.5% rate and you make $1,000 additional payments. It's going to suck, but your total interest paid is $254. Your total cost of the loan is $654 after you have it paid off 173 months. Whereas if you get it for 5.5% rate, you paid off in 360 months, which is 30 years, but you're technically paying 160-ish, 170-ish $1,000 more on the loan. So interesting, yeah, but obviously the best case scenario, in my opinion, is to do the 5.5. And on top of that, you add an extra $1,000 a month. Now you're paying $188K of interest. You pay it off in 2038, which is approximately still about 15 years. Cost of loan is $588. So we can kind of get an idea of how it works there. So essentially, that's how it boils down. So whenever you see a video that says, hey, here's a secret, put this much money and you can have your house paid off in 15 years. Yeah, that's true. You could do that. But remember, it's just less opportunities for them to charge that crazy interest rate, but they're still getting that crazy interest rate. They're still getting that money. money. So don't feel like you're like, I mean, yeah, it's a preferred, but it's also like such a crazy thing to say. Oh, just make, for those that are making more money, just do this. Duh. But I don't know. Is it a smart idea to do this, or should you just put that extra money into some kind of mutual fund or some kind of other ways to invest? I don't know. It may be worth a video exploring later. So anyways, that's a breakdown of how it works. Let me know if you guys have any questions. I know this video might be helpful, especially to anybody who is out there looking at different interest rates and really getting a good understanding, or maybe you guys are getting influence to think that, hey, high interest rate doesn't matter. Just put an extra $400 a month, you'll be fine. Anyways, let me know what you guys think. YouTube thinks you should watch this video next, so I appreciate you if you go watch it. Thank you so much. You have a good one.